I have a dear friend of mine. My co-author on that book is a man by the name of Tom Olinek, and he is the Pittsburgh native. He's the Yinzer,
Oh.
but he's not a writer. He's a
Hmm.
biotech executive,
Hmm.
and for years, decades, he's been he had this hypothesis that when his hometown Pittsburgh had to go through a deindustrialization transformation, they struggled, right? But they
Hmm.
came out on smelling like a rose comparatively on the other side, right? When you look at Pittsburgh today, it routinely makes lists of most livable cities in the world.
Hmm.
It's renowned for its academia, medical research, healthcare, technology, including robotics and other things. I mean, it's a blossoming new economy city.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I chat about stories and creativity in all different styles and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and my goal is to promote what Dale Carnegie stated in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. It's my firm belief that the goal of most creative people is to try to understand themselves and others. That's what makes artwork of all kinds so compelling. But more than that, the personal stories of my guests promote understanding as well. Roger C. Schenck, a cognitive scientist, said, human beings are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. It's my hope that Story Power will help us understand each other better by sharing the stories of my guests. Today is episode 115, and I'm talking to Ray Hartjen. And Ray, I was looking at your Podmatch profile. You have so many things to talk about that we might be here for a while.
Yeah, and I love to talk, so this is perfect, Lucinda. Let's get at it.
Okay. No, I have to say, I love the name of your book, even though I'm not a football fan. Immaculate. How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh. I can't wait to hear about that. And then you have a memoir about your cancer journey, and you have done a lot of really interesting jobs. So I'll let you start where you want to start.
Well, I'll start where you started, and that is the first book is a book entitled "Immaculate: How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh," and it's part a football story, but it's also a part a history of Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. I have a dear friend of mine. My co-author on that book is a man by the name of Tom Olinek, and he is the Pittsburgh native. He's the Yinzer,
Oh.
but he's not a writer. He's a biotech executive,
Mhm.
and for years, decades, he's been he had this hypothesis that when his hometown Pittsburgh had to go through a deindustrialization transformation, they struggled, right? But they came out on smelling like a rose comparatively on the other side, right? When you look at Pittsburgh today, it routinely makes lists of most livable cities in the world. It's renowned for its academia, medical research, healthcare, technology, including robotics and other things. I mean, it's a blossoming new economy city. And other Rust Belt cities like Pittsburgh, Cleveland and Detroit and others, they're continuing to struggle with their deindustrialization transformation. And so for decades, Tom had been talking about this book idea, and he thought, well, wouldn't it make a great book? And he kept talking about it and kept talking about it. And then one day I just said, hey, Tom, man, you've talked to me about it for a decade. You've talked to it for your family for all this time. How about we just get started, and if it should ever veer off course from your vision, we'll stop. Well, it never did. So it's a book we're proud of. You can't tell the story of how the Steelers saved Pittsburgh without also telling the story of Pittsburgh, and you can't tell the story of Pittsburgh without telling the story of Pennsylvania and a lot of other things. So it's a book that kind of weaves around, kind of viewed like a strand of DNA and these parallel paths that we make connections with, starting off with this, a rather unlikely source of bond for the community. And that is this football team that for the first, 40 years of its existence was pretty bad. Then all of a sudden they were very, very good. And it was a team that was built in the, mirror image of the community, hardworking, blue collar, that type of approach. So really proud of that book. And, I kind of want to just quickly segue into the second book, that, part of, being diagnosed with cancer, it readjusted my timeline. I have a simple timeline exercise that your listeners right now, follow along with me out there, group. Just if you have a piece of paper and a pencil handy, you can try it that way, or just do it in your mind. But draw a horizontal line from left to right, and then on the left-hand side you make a little tick mark, and the right-hand side at the end you make a tick mark. Now the left-hand tick mark represents your birth, and of course the right hand represents your death. Then you just take a couple of moments to think, where do you believe you are on your timeline on this planet, right? And you make that dash there, and there you go. Timeline exercise. And I, Lucinda, before my diagnosis, man, I was going to forever, right? My time was like in the middle. But then I recognized, my timeline's a little closer to the right than maybe I had thought. And none of us have tomorrow promised and the like. But I know I can get into later about taking things for granted, but it really sped me up to this idea: if not now, when? And that's that kind of motto that I had with my friend Tom. It's like, Tom, if not now, when? I mean, let's get this book started and done, because if not, maybe we never do it. And it's a book that should be read. So I think that was kind of the impetus for that getting started, and then doing the other book as well, and a lot of other things in between.
Yeah. Now I have family members who have cancer, who've had cancer, and it's like it was probably this way for you too. You just sort of said that you're on this path, and then boom, all of a sudden you veer off. It's a new trajectory of your life. And my brother-in-law, when he had cancer, we saw him last year, and he said, I have a new perspective on life. Things I never really thought about before because of my cancer diagnosis, or because, well, now he's cancer-free. But yeah, great. So is that the same thing? Did that happen to you?
Yeah, it's when I was first diagnosed, a lot of thoughts went through my head. I had a little bit of a warm up to it. I was originally diagnosed. My journey to diagnosis started with a anemic blood value. My hemoglobin was a little low. And, in hindsight, maybe I was a little tired, but, at the time I was 54 years old, a full-time job, married, 2 children, and, expensive private universities, kind of had a right to be a little fatigued, right? As we went through the process of trying to figure out the root cause of my anemia, finally it involved a bone marrow biopsy. Pro tip for you, Lucinda: never to be considered as a hobby or recreational or optional in any ways. It's an uncomfortable process. But that bone marrow biopsy showed that 90% of my bone marrow was cancerous, right? So my diagnosis, we kind of warmed up as we were getting there. I got referred to a hematologist, and then in making that appointment, I discovered that my hematologist was an oncologist also. Like all hematologists are, apparently. And I thought that was the first time like cancer came into the equation. This is a possibility. And then as, working with her, we started narrowing down the possibilities, and it sure sounded like it was going to be something that ended in an A, something like lymphoma or multiple myeloma. So, I had a few months to kind of prepare, but once it did hit me, it's like, wow, now it's real. It took a couple of weeks, until that was the first thing I thought about in the morning, last thing I thought about at night, and quite often during the middle of the day. And, it took a little while, a couple of weeks, and I had to, the learnings began to sink in. And, if you're open to it and, you have a growth mindset, these types of things present themselves. And one of the things that really presented itself was, I've taken so much for granted over the course of my life. I've been fortunate. I've lived in a bubble, and I don't think I'm unique in that. I think it's maybe indicative of our human condition sometimes to take things for granted.
Right.
And that timeline exercise certainly helped me out. It's like, wow, I'm further to the right. What are the things I want to do? What's the legacy I want to leave? How do I want to be a role model for my family, my friends, my community, other patients, and the like? And that kind of led me to this, realization that I took too much for granted, particularly time. I took all tomorrows for granted, and therefore next weeks and next months, sometimes next years, and in some instances next decades. I want to do this, 20 years or whatever, and just took that for granted. But it wasn't just the time, Lucinda. I started recognizing that it was the people. Because of time, I would take people relationships for granted. It's like I could be thinking about Lucinda, but I'll talk to her tomorrow. She's gonna be here tomorrow. I'm gonna be here tomorrow. Well, you know what? I'll talk to her tomorrow.
Right.
And years would go by before I connected with the people that were most dear to me. So that kind of quickly snapped me around. Stop taking things for granted. Stop taking time for granted specifically. With that, what are the things that you want to accomplish, and who do you want to be most involved with, most intimately in your life? And, I'm a musician. We're always looking for ways of making more money through music. And one of those ways is selling T-shirts at gigs. And so for, decades, I've been looking for little, catchy little sayings to put on the back of a T-shirt, and what started as "if not now, when," migrated to another motto, and a motto I try to live, wake up every morning thinking about, and that is punch today in the face. And punch today in the face is, personify today. I want to grab today's attention, and for, any of you listeners out there that have ever been punched in the face, that kind of grabs your attention pretty quickly, right? I want to, Lucinda, today is a gift, right? It's remarkable how different you approach the day if you wake up in the morning and you recognize you've received the gift of today. And not everybody received this gift, right?
Right.
So how can I honor them? How can I honor myself? And how can I honor the day? What do I want to do to seize the day and to let it know I was here, right? In the old cowboy parlance, it was, ride your horse hard and put her up wet. Now I want to use up today, every second. And, it gives me that sense of joy, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of satisfaction, and peace of mind. And, then I can lay in bed knowing that I got as much as I could out of today, and then kind of lean over and give tomorrow fair warning that I'm coming for you next. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, so if you want to share, what is your daily regimen in terms of managing your cancer, or do you still have that cancer? I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incurable cancer. So I'll be doing this forever. It's an interesting question because I've had to grow through my approach to that as well. Throughout my entire life, I've always approached things, kind of with like a training camp mentality. There's always a preparation period, and then there's some sort of capstone or milestone event, right? If it's athletically, it was a game or a race. Musically, it was a performance. Academically, a test or an exam. Professionally, it was a big deliverable or whatever. So I would lead up to something, and that's the approach that I took initially with cancer. It's like, all right, what can I do? What can I control on this? Because there's some things I can't control, so let's not worry about that. But what can I do? So it's my diet, my physical conditioning, et cetera. And I was like in this training camp modality, getting ready for fight night, getting ready for game day. And after 2 weeks, Lucinda, I was exhausted. I was just physically exhausted because of all the tolls that I was having to pay. And
right.
Musician, I kind of view it as a mixing board. And so there's my physical being, my mental being, my emotional being, and my spiritual being, and all those kind of play amongst one of the others. And after a couple of weeks, I came to this realization that I'm in a marathon. I'm not in a sprint, and there is not a singular game day or a fight night or what have you. Every day for me, as a person with a chronic condition, is a game day or fight night. So how can I be in a sustainable process, right? So if my daily routine, I take a I just started a second line of treatment. My first line of treatment has the efficacy has waned, so my
Oh.
disease has progressed a little bit. So I just started a second line of treatment, but it's much like the first line, and that is a daily pill that gets cycled
Mhm.
through 2 weeks on, 1 week off, weekly chemo injections into my abdomen.
Mhm.
That in a couple of months will then go down into biweekly, and then some steroids to smooth out the process. So, I have my regular medicine schedule, but then there's, what do I do to, balance out those four
Mhm.
components that I talked about? Make sure that I get in I exercise regularly, and that includes walking. Walking has become a very big part of
Mhm.
my daily regimen. I walked 1,200 miles last year, and I'm on pace for about 1,300 this year. Got all this started when a friend of mine, when I was coming out of my stem cell transplant at the end of 2019, I saw that she had a New Year's resolution, the 1,000-mile challenge. And that is to walk 1,000 miles, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. It's 2.74 miles a day. And I tried to get more each year and faster each year. Last
Mhm.
year it was 1,204 miles at
Mhm.
about a 14:59 pace. So I find that walking, allows me to get outside, kind of, communicate with nature, watch the deer, the bunny,
Mhm.
occasional bobcat and things like that, the birds. I can listen to music. I can frame out thoughts in my head as I'm, writing, whether it's a song or what have you.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's been great for me. And so, what can I do physically? That helps me out my mental state and my emotional state, and just make sure everything's kind of together.
Yeah. Do you have to make sure you get a proper amount of sleep
Yeah,
as well?
fatigue is part of it. It's been kind of a stressful a couple of months now. We've just recently relocated.
Oh.
So, that affects, in fact, we haven't even moved in. We're temporarily living with our daughter in Southern California. And hopefully we'll be moving into our house next week. So that's affected my sleep a little bit. With the disease progression, the change management of having to change doctors and healthcare situations,
Oh,
trying to come to
yeah.
consensus with all these doctors. I've seen three doctors who are highly respected, and I respect all three of them. But they each have, different suggested courses of treatment. I have three to choose from. So
Oh.
really, it's always I would have liked it if all three of them suggested the same one. That would have been a lot easier to do and take away some of the ambiguity, which in turn leads to some anxiety.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, sleep is important. I try to get a good night's sleep, and hopefully we can settle down here next week, and I can get that going. But yeah.
Oh man, moving is so stressful. I've done it so many times in my life.
I grew up in an army family, and I'm 60 years old. So this is
Uh-huh.
back in the day when they moved army families around a lot. So it's
Mm-hmm.
well versed as moving as a kid, but as an adult, I mean, Lori and I, my wife, had lived in Pleasanton, California for 24 years. That's by far longer than I've ever lived anywhere before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been reacquainted with the pain and
Of
suffering that
moving.
comes with moving.
Yes,
This too
yes.
shall pass, right, Lucinda?
Right, yes. I live in a near a military town, Sierra Vista, where Fort Huachuca is.
Mhm.
And when I was teaching high school, yeah, there were kids who, every 2 years they got moved,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of them came from they had come to Sierra Vista from Europe, and they were not happy that they were living in a small town.
Yeah, and but I never enjoyed small town living. I always aspired and dreamed about the big city. But as I get older and older, the small town certainly seems good. I
Mhm.
think this is, we're moving into Mission Viejo, and this is probably,
Oh
our
yeah.
last home. We want to be
Uh-huh.
closer to our daughter, who's down here in
Yeah.
Southern California.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I am so tired of having so many people between where I am and where I want to be at certain times.
Yes.
Right? And so the thought of a small town with one stoplight,
Yes.
or maybe not even a stoplight, going to the same diner for breakfast every morning, things like that. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, really. Well, we've actually lived in Arizona for 28 years. I can't believe it. And we lived in Portland, Oregon for 15, but it was a busy,
Yeah.
neighborhood and city. And so we now, for the last 20 something years, we've lived on the Mexican border, near the Mexican border in the country. And I really like that. So we are planning on moving one more time, but it's going to be a really small town.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, a big city.
Like the idea of getting an old, early 70s square body pickup truck, driving around town with my dog Quinn next to me and just, waving all the people as opposed to waving all the
That's
people you
right.
don't know. Right? So,
Right. Yes. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Wow. So, and you're working on a third book, right?
I am working on a third book.
Indianapolis 500.
Yes, ma'am. Do you remember the Scholastic America catalogs?
Oh,
That's
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
I mean, I'm older than you, so yes.
yeah,
Yes.
some listeners might know. I don't know if they still have them, but they're these very thin paper
Right.
catalogs. Your English teacher typically would get them, pass them around, and you could look at all these. You could order these books,
Mm-hmm.
I was probably, it was probably 1971 or 1972. I saw this book written by an author named Hal Heedham called The Indy 500 30 Days in May. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Oh.
So I bought it and I read that book, no joke, probably 3 or 4 times a year for a decade. It was a book that chronicled the 1970 Indianapolis 500. And,
Oh.
it captivated my attention and it ignited this passion for auto racing, but very specifically that event.
Mm-hmm.
It all just got cemented. A handful of years later, my father got stationed at what was at that point in time Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
So he moved to Indianapolis, where the Speedway is, right?
Right. Right.
Going
Yeah.
to the Speedway and seeing those cars and hearing them, it just cemented my passion for the event. It's something that for years I've thought about. I would like to rewrite this book that caught my attention
Mm-hmm.
and that ignited my passion. Just update it. Like I said, that original book chronicled the 1970 race. I want to chronicle a year's race. So I if not now, when? Punching the
Right.
day in the face, right? I said, well, I'm going to do it for the 108th running of the Indy 500 coming up this May.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're coming up this month, later on this month. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a work in progress. Now, of course, the meat of the book really starts. All this has been kind of the lead up and things that are happening, but things, the track opens for practice, I think, in a couple of Tuesdays, a week and a half from now, for the 500. And that's when the heavy riding gets started.
Right. So I'm assuming you're going to Indianapolis.
Oh, I will not be able to go for the full time because I've got treatment. And
Oh,
I am
right.
tethered, but
Yeah.
a couple trips out there to get some of the behind the scenes bit of the book.
And be there on the day of the race.
That's still in question. I hope so. I've been a ticket holder for a long, long time. I think 1980, at least 86.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's if you're ever in the Paddock Penthouse, wave to me at the top.
I'm probably not going to go because I have really sensitive hearing, and that seems like it would
I have ruined a lot of my hearing, being young and dumb at the Indy 500. It's loud, but also standing in front of guitar amplifiers
Right.
and things like that. So yeah, I definitely wear ear protection now, doing things, trying to
Mm-hmm.
keep what hearing I do have left.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of people that just don't get the Indy 500. I was at a book signing event, last year about this time, and another writer was there, and she's like, I don't think I get it. And I'm like, I understand that you might not get it. Some people might look at a TV. The Indy 500 is 200 laps around a 2.5 mile track. It's 4 left turns each lap. People are like, I don't get it, but I always tell them, give it a try. And here's
Right.
why. The Indy 500 there's 400,000 people there that day.
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid. That was, the race day at Indianapolis. There were more people around that track than there were in the entire city of Cincinnati. So there are a lot of people there, and it's a spectacle. There's the noise, there's the vision. You can feel those cars go by. You can taste the cars, smell, the exhaust, and it's like sensory overload. And you should definitely go. It's like going to the Kentucky Derby, which is going to be
Mm-hmm.
conducted like geez, going to be tomorrow.
Sunday, I think, or tomorrow.
Saturday, yeah. And
Yeah,
go and then make up your choice, make up your mind there. Yeah, I
right,
recognize $5 is not for everybody, but it is for me.
right.
And I like it.
Yeah, well, I was thinking when I was a kid, my dad was really great at doing the things with us that we loved. Now, one thing that he really did was institute family movie night. So I became a movie buff because of him. But on Saturdays and Sundays he would watch the football games or the basketball games or whatever it was that my brother really wanted to watch. And my dad would always take the opposite team of my brother so that they could argue about it, have
Yeah.
fun talking about, oh no, look at that. See, that player did this. And, it was always really fun to listen to them. But, I think that everybody has something that they really love, and you can't maybe explain why that is, but it speaks to you. And I think that sports fans and people who love art or people who go to concerts and have their favorite bands. I mean, it's all kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Teach their own, right? And it's cool when people can discover their passion
Mm-hmm.
and pursue it, particularly if you can, try to make a living off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the interesting thing. And I've got a diverse amount of passion. Sometimes I got to narrow it down. 'Cause you can't do everything at once, and you can't afford to do everything at once, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So for me, it's been stories my whole entire life.
yeah,
That's why I have 2 degrees in theater and, and taught theater and did theater and yeah. So, and now story power. So yeah, that's my passion. But I kind of understand that because when I was a kid, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and it's June usually they have it. That's the second
yeah.
largest Rose Festival parade is in Portland. And all the floats have to have natural, it's like the one in Pasadena. They all have to have natural, things on the floats. Well, we would go when we were kids and actually be there at the parade. And there's something about being with all those people and seeing those beautiful floats and hearing the bands and stuff that sometimes I would start crying and because of all the beauty of it for one thing, but also all the swirling emotions. So I think that's part of why people love to go to sporting events because of the communal nature of it. Is that
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I like that communal nature. I also, like what you said about, when you're experiencing things and they're so emotional that, that's
Mm-hmm.
the great thing about storytelling, when storytelling really hits. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting as I've gotten older, I've become more and more emotional. I've become more and more comfortable with my emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, I was just in discussing this a few days ago. I was new for me, I was a late bloomer, really kind of fully understanding my emotions and the whole concept of emotional intelligence and the EQ.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
never even heard of that until I was about, 29 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's it's been rewarding. You can have deeper, more intimate relationships with people when you're not when it's easier for you to identify your own emotions and how you feel, but
Right.
also be empathetic to how they feel. And
Right.
in the past
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of thought of like if you're emotional or if you're sensitive, I kind of viewed that as a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife, she's incredibly sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
and she will claim that her sensitivity is her superpower. And so the younger Ray would be, I don't get that at all. But as I've continued to mature, and it's something I continue to work on, and I realized that having this being in tune with my own emotions, and then trying to be in tune with some others, really beneficial to get back to your the sports thing and or even anything that might the story that comes about and the feelings it evokes in you.
Mm-hmm.
I've discovered that I've become like a real teary-eyed sap when it comes to the backstories of athletes, particularly in the Olympics,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
I will watch the event, but then they'll do this like behind the scenes thing. Is somebody overcoming adversity? A lot of times it's injuries or something like that.
Yes.
Something in their family, and as I'm watching these things, I'm getting all like teary-eyed, like go,
Right.
hope you do
Yeah.
really well, and
Yeah.
yeah, as I've gotten older, and part of it, I don't know if it's because of the aging, and part of it's because I've been working on trying to better understand my own emotions, and certainly being a cancer patient, I've been able to explore that a little bit more. But yeah, I love that about storytelling, and it's
Mhm.
rewarding when people can tell me that through my storytelling that I've touched them in some way.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever made anybody cry, but particularly with this latest book, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma, just this week alone, I've had my wife had a random conversation with a woman at a PetSmart store. Turns out that turned out they started talking about multiple myeloma, and this woman said that her stepmother in Utah had just recently been diagnosed, but that she was finding this book written by a patient to be of value. Turned out to be this book. And about this week I've connected with readers in New Zealand and South Africa.
Oh,
I want to
yeah.
write Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma. I had the pleasure of participating in a lot of interviews and some videos
Right.
after my diagnosis, just from my online persona. And
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
people started reaching out to me via social media, asking me questions. Usually it was patients, but sometimes caregivers, just
Mhm.
asking questions about my diagnosis, my treatment, what they might be able to expect and the like. And I found a new calling, really.
Oh, that's
Cancer
so
became a
cool.
calling, and so I wanted to be a resource for the community. But I was doing a lot of one-to-one. So I was thinking, how can I do how can I scale it, do one to many? So I said, well,
Right.
I'm a writer. How about if I write a book? But I also didn't want to write a book, about me, right? I wanted to write a book that, well, I
Right.
wanted to be a resource for the patient community, the
Hmm.
caregiver community is often overlooked, and allies. So I wanted a book by the community. I wanted it for the community, and I wanted to benefit the community. So
Hmm.
what's really important to me is the back of this book. There's a little logo here, the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
All of my proceeds, all Net Writers proceeds are going to benefit the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, because we're all in this together, right? Let's
Right.
fight for a cure, but along the way, advanced treatments for all of us. So I'm proud about that. And I did want to also point out that fact about caregivers. And caregivers are the unsung heroes of anybody
I
facing a
know.
serious health issue.
Yeah.
I think it's harder being a caregiver than it is being the patient. And I've had a lot of people
Hmm.
tell me likewise who have been both, right? So
Hmm.
if you know a patient out there, reach out and see if you can help them out. If you know a caregiver out there, check on them and see how
Hmm.
they're doing. They're important people in the process.
Yeah. My sister, my youngest sister, was the caregiver for my mom.
Mhm.
And my mom, actually, it all started when my sister and her family and my mom all lived here near us. And then to help my niece, who was a ballet, she wanted to do ballet professionally. They decided they were going to move to Colorado, where there was this really great ballet school. Well, they got to Colorado, and my brother in law couldn't find a job. But my mom decided, I want to go be with my youngest grandchildren because she had never been near the older ones. Um, and so for years, they were all together. Well, the last few years, my mom had been failing. And she was pretty much okay at her 90th birthday celebration that we had. It was a big family thing. But right after that, she started failing, failing, failing. And so my poor sister was trying to work and take care of my mom. And it's so stressful, especially if you have teenage kids that you have to ferry around, and I think you're right. I think people don't understand the stress that the caregivers go through. And I think there are probably a lot of them who are facing burnout because it's difficult. My mom made just enough money that they couldn't get a caregiver to take care of her.
Yeah.
I mean, Oh, the runaround of all the paperwork you have to do. My brother got involved and helped with that. But yeah, so my mom died in February, and it took it. My husband and I went up there to be with them, and she just kept saying, "I'm so glad you guys are here because I really don't know what." Because we had to go through some of my mom's stuff. And I'm just discombobulated. I don't really know what to do next. I don't know how I feel.
Yeah.
And I didn't ever take care of my mom, but I kind of did that for my grandmother.
Mhm.
And so I kind of understood what it was like. I mean, my grandmother didn't live with me, and eventually my mom didn't live with my sister, but still, it's a big job.
Yeah, it's a huge job, and they're the unsung heroes of
Oh,
the
yeah,
relationship. You know,
really.
when I was first diagnosed, people reached out to me and asked, like, what can you do? What can I do for you? What can I do for you? And I'm like, I don't right now. I don't really need anything. I don't need someone to drive me to treatment and things like that. But very quickly over time, as I was speaking at fundraisers and the like, I came up with a little list of things that people could do for me, and I wanted to share that with you because I think it applies to this
Oh,
caregiver
that's
thing.
good.
It's just this well-rehearsed list. Number
Hmm.
one thing you can do for me is go see your doctor on a regular basis, and that means at least an annual exam, and with that annual exam, routine blood test. I know it's not particularly convenient. Some people don't like needles and stuff like that, but it is an investment in yourself. And if you're not worth investing in, what is, right?
Right. Hmm.
Again, let's go back to a little earlier in the conversation, Lucinda. 90% of my bone marrow was cancerous, and I felt great. Maybe in hindsight, a little bit fatigued, but as part of my exercise regimen, I'm an avid road cyclist, about 2,500 miles a year. My performance metrics leading up to my diagnosis with 90% of my bone marrow cancerous with anemic values with low red blood cell counts, my performance metrics were every bit as good as they had been for the previous 5 years. I was feeling good and I
Hmm.
was active and my performance metrics were great. At the same time, I, I, that's pretty significant. 90% of your bone marrow cancers.
Yeah.
So go see your doctor and get on top of things. Early intervention is way better than a late intervention.
Hmm.
Get educated. Number two is I called eliminate the twos or mitigate the twos, and it fits into number twos. And you don't need me to tell you what the twos are. Your risk factors are things like you eat too much, or you drink too much, you smoke too much, you exercise too little, you eat too few fruits and vegetables, and so forth.
Hmm.
Not saying you don't live, just saying know your risk factors, mitigate them, right? Number
Hmm.
three, and kind of dovetails into our conversation about caregivers. If you know somebody going through a chronic health issue or a serious health issue, reach out. It is a daunting task if you're doing it alone. It is a daunting task even if you have somebody with you. And I'm lucky that I have my wife with me. We are inundated with postal mail. We get mail all the time with doctor's appointments, mail that comes from medical providers, from insurance payers, and from pharmaceutical companies. That's
Hmm.
just the snail mail we get. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff, and so if you know somebody, reach out. And I know what a lot of you are thinking out there. It's like, well, geez, I don't know what to say. But the good news is, as soon as that thought runs through your head, now you do know what to say. You just fess up. Lucinda, I love you. I care for you. You're important to me. I just don't know what to say.
Right.
Can we just work our way through this, kind of difficult 30 seconds of conversation, and then we can, then I can support you the best I can. Just if you don't know what to say, start there, and
Yeah.
don't let it go away. And then fourth and finally, find your passion, and you are going to find your passion. It's going to speak to you, and in particularly, I hope it's a healthcare type of a passion because we're all in this together. We all get something. So
Hmm.
find your passion and then support that passion with your time and or your money.
Hmm.
Those are the four things I want. But don't forget to reach out. Number three, reach out to people, and that includes the caregiver. Caregivers wear themselves out. I've seen it where they're pushing wheelchairs around and things like that, and before long they end up in the hospital being exhausted. So reach out and see what you can do.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. Yeah. I was going to say, even in grief, grief, if people are going through grief, one of the best things that I ever learned about that was my grandfather was this really great guy. He was a minister. And when I was in college, I went to the college that was sponsored by my church. And at homecoming, somebody came up to me. I think they were, like the parents of one of the people that was in my house. And they said, "Are you Jim Sage's granddaughter?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, he was my grandfather." "Well, I have this story to tell you." And I always cry when I tell this story. But she said, "We had a death in our family, and your grandfather came to our house and he did the best ministry of anybody because there were all these people coming through and, oh, your loved one is in a better place." And all the things that people say when somebody dies. She said, "Your grandfather just sat with us. He didn't cried with us. He didn't say anything, really. He just was with us." And sometimes that's all people who are sick need too, is somebody just to come there and hold their hand and, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." And what, "I love you." I mean, sometimes that's all they need too.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes just first of all, just because somebody's, facing disease doesn't mean everything has changed, right? It doesn't always have
Right.
to be the
Right.
patient as a person. It's the other things, come over and watch the game. It's just
Right.
like with your loved one, you might not have to say anything at all. You just
Right.
hold their hand, right?
Right. Mhm.
And be there with folks and just let them know you're there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, reach out, and sometimes it's the smallest things,
Yeah.
and just enjoy each other's company. That's why you're in each other's lives,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Share dinner, watch a movie. Yeah. Play
Yeah,
games.
yeah. It doesn't always have to be about the patient and the disease. And I also like to, tell the patients it doesn't always have to be about you either. It's
Mhm. Mhm.
it's important to in the empathetic side of things, try to understand what the other person's going through, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
I have learned an awful lot from support groups, and I that's one of the things that drives me to want to be a patient advocate is that I've learned a lot about cancer, and a lot about this fight that I have and the journey that others are on,
Mhm.
through the people that came before me. And as I'm feeling good, I want to be the person that that has a helping hand reaching out behind them to pull people forward who might need it. Right.
Right. Right.
It breaks my heart though when I hear some people say like, what, with a diagnosis, you find out who your real friends are quickly. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to judge you because everyone's into this a little bit differently. But I always like to encourage people to give their friends a bit of a break. In my case, I had some knowledge of, I was going through medical tests to work up to my diagnosis. So I had a
Mhm.
little warm up, and it was difficult for me to get my diagnosis. But I also, was working on like 2 months to get there. When I tell a friend about that, that takes like 10 seconds, right? And it hits them
Right.
out of nowhere. And first of all, I don't know what's going on with them. They might be battling a disease that they've just kept quiet or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, have some people not reached out to me? Yeah. But, I'm not going to judge them for it.
Right.
It's, maybe they don't know what to say.
Right.
And that's fine, right? My friends are my friends for a reason. I've invited them to my life for a reason. They're still those same people, and so I
Yeah.
like to tell cancer patients as well. Give your friends a break. Try to figure out what their space are, and then what are you
Mhm.
doing to try to carry on the friendship and the like. I'm
Right.
always wary of pointing the finger. I was once
Right.
taught years ago that you point the finger out this way. Don't forget there's three other fingers pointing right back at you.
Right.
Right. So, what are the things
Yeah.
that you do? Are these relationships important to you? And if they are, what can you do to continue to nurture them? But realizing that over time, you do lose closeness with some people. And, a deep friendship might, turn into more of a acquaintance type of thing. But then
Mhm.
there's other relationships that were acquaintances that then turn into deep, intimate relationships. So,
Right.
I recognize that, but, it takes two people to communicate. Let's not ever forget that, and other people are going through, they've got a lot of stuff they're going through too. So
Exactly.
wouldn't it be cool,
Exactly.
Lucinda, if we just kind of each gave each other a little bit of a break, gave
Yeah.
each other the benefit of a doubt every once in a while?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Going back to the sports thing, I just recently found this YouTube channel called Cinema Therapy, and it's a therapist and a movie maker, and they've grown up together. They're best friends, and they watch movies, and then they talk about the things that the characters go through, from kind of a therapy point of view. These are the things that the character did really well, and this is what you can learn from them. Well, I found them through Ted Lasso,
Uh-huh.
and because they don't talk about television shows, but it was a television show that really affected both of them. And one of the things that I love about Ted Lasso is there's an episode where he quotes Walt Whitman, and it's be curious, not judgmental. And so even if like I have arthritis, it's not it's not fun sometimes trying to walk around.
Yeah.
um, and but I try not to let that affect my curiosity about other people,
Mhm.
especially my family members. And so, yeah, I try to keep in contact with them and find out what they're up to. And we, 2020, the end of 2022 and 2023, we had a lot of deaths in our family. And so, yeah, it's made us try to stay connected with each other a lot more. And yes, I like the whole idea of not concentrating so much on yourself. Doesn't matter whether you have health issues or not, because sometimes, if you feel like you're having a really difficult time, finding somebody else to help really helps you in the
Yeah,
long
I think it's okay to, to be vulnerable and to let people know that you might need help and to offer help to others. And,
run.
I
Mhm.
do love that, there's so many great, positive thoughts that come out from watching the Ted Lasso show.
Yeah.
If your viewers and listeners haven't watched it, give it a shot because there's a great many like great kind of lessons to be a better human. And we have two things I want to talk about. One, reaching out to people. We have this technology that allows us to reach out really quickly,
Yes.
even just like a simple text message. Take it.
Right.
If you still don't do it though, take advantage of that and reach out to the people that are most important to you. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Punch today in the face. Don't sit around. And then another thing is we have so many people out there creating so much content. A lot of it's just plain flat out misinformation. As a society, we've gotten very lazy about just reading headlines and then taking like one person's word for it, when oftentimes people are expressing their opinion as fact, right? And everyone's trying to shout each other down, like
Mhm.
you're wrong and I'm right, and this is why. And
Mhm.
it's never been worse than it is now, and it's just getting worse. But take a moment to try to first seek to understand, right?
Right.
And have an open mind and to learn and discover and approach things like, go around and take a look at like a 5-year-old kid, that has a beginner's attitude about everything,
Mhm.
and they're a sponge and they're learning, and over time, we think we've seen it all. And in fact, we project the things that we've had in the past into the future.
Right.
If you've ever really kind of thought about being present, there is no fear in the present. And
Yes.
if you look at a young kid, you'll see that because they don't have this life history that they're projecting forward. Like, I don't
Right.
know, jumping around and playing around at the top of the stairs is a bad idea because I've never fallen down the stairs before. If you
Right.
fall down the stairs once before, now every time you're at the top messing around, you've got this fear, right? Live in the present where you're not projecting in the future, like, well, if
Right.
this may happen. There is no fear, but live in the present also allows you to, approach things with a beginner's attitude, and then you can use your experience to start filtering,
Right.
what might work out. But yeah, it's I do love that idea. Be open, and not judgmental. Let's you
Right.
learn so
Yeah.
much when you kind of freeze that judgment,
Yeah.
and try to gather real facts. And right now we have I think the world is endemic of, there's so much content being created by so many people, and their, opinions are being presented as facts, and those are that's never
Yeah.
a good.
Yeah. You have to be discerning. You have to be
Yeah.
discerning. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Another thing is that um we go through life changes, your cancer diagnosis is an example, but other people go through life. You go through all kinds of different life changes. Like my husband in 2 months is going to be retiring. And
Congratulations.
and I've already retired from teaching. And of course, we're still going to do our creative things because he's an artist, and a graphic artist. And so, but when you move or when you get married or when you have children or when the children leave and go off to college, when you retire, all those things, normal life things, are change. Your life goes in a kind of a new direction, and you have to be open to letting something new come into your awareness, or experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the cool stuff. New things, discovering new things.
Yeah. Right.
If you think time flies, time typically flies when you're just stuck in the same routine and doing the same thing over and over again, right? And time slows down a little bit when you do things that are different.
Right.
And you learn, like, wow, this is something else.
Cool. Yeah.
Years ago, I went through an exercise to identify my values, and they weren't values that you aspired to be. Like, I want to be this. These are, this was an exercise that made you think back, like, what are the things that you value the most?
Mm-hmm.
It was around the year 2000 when I went through this exercise, and over time, your values can change, but for me, they haven't. My values since 2000 and since year 2000 have been family, friends, fun, fitness, education, and challenge. 6 of them. And, when my actions are consistent with those my behaviors are consistent with those values, that leads to having a peace of mind, a sense of satisfaction, and joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I catch myself, behaving or acting in a way that are contra to my values, those create like stress and they do, and anxiety, and they do not help foster, a peace of mind, or joy and satisfaction and the like, right? And so, I look for things, when I mention my values of family, friends, fun, fitness, education, and challenge, people are like, well, hey, there's not work in there anywhere. You're absolutely right. I do not value work. That doesn't mean I don't work. I just want to work in an environment that, I'm part of a team that kind of feels a bit like family, that I'm having fun at work, that I'm learning at work, education, that work is challenging for me, right? So you can see that there are things that I do. This is what I look for, based on my values. So I always like to kind of, ask people about what their values are, and sometimes as an exercise that helps you, them think like, wow, I am like caught up in doing some things that really aren't conducive to my values, and they're not what I want to accomplish, and again, back to, if not now, when, and punch today in the face. What are the things that are most important to you, and who do you want to have, close to you in your life? And let's spend time doing that. And hopefully with that brings you that joy and satisfaction, right?
Right. Yeah. Take the time to figure that out.
Yeah. And sometimes it does, like that timeline exercise we talked about earlier. That doesn't take that long, but it is an investment of like 5 minutes to really get some introspective thought to it. And then revisit from time to time, and then go through your values and say, have they changed? And continually think about, what is it, the things that are most important to you. I used to facilitate a course from Franklin Covey, and Franklin Covey people were, a big part of their existence is, well, from Stephen Covey, who the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But it was also the time management system. That was called, it's been rebranded over the years, first things first, what matters most, et cetera. But there's this interesting video of Stephen Covey, and he's at a presentation, a seminar, back in the days before we had webinars, and he pulls a participant up on stage, and on stage he has like a big glass vase, and in that glass vase it's about half full of pea gravel, and then off to the side are these big rocks, and these rocks are all labeled with something like a big deliverable at work. It's a kid's performance at school, it's vacation and on. So the woman is tasked with, looking through these big rocks and seeing, how can I, what are the things that I need to put in there? And with the realization that the glass vase represents the week or the month, the time period that she has.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's trying to, stuff in the big rocks, and she gets to the point where she can't fit everything in. And so she reluctantly takes out her vacation, and she puts that aside because she needed to put something else in there, like a work project or whatever. And, you can even see the disappointment in her face, and Stephen Covey goes, "Oh, you had to take out your vacation." Yeah. The crowd groans like, "Oh, that's too bad." And he goes, "Well, what if we change this paradigm a little bit? What if we do this?" And he brings out another glass vase. And it's not like you get to add more time, but let's try a different approach. Let's take all the big rocks that you want and put it into the glass vase. So she does it. And then now take all these little rocks that were in the first vase, see if they fit in the second vase. And sure enough, they do. When you put the big rocks in first, and then you put the little pea gravel in and kind of shake it around a little bit, and it fills in all the empty spaces, you can get everything into your week, right? So the lesson there is to plan your time around your big rocks. What are the things that are most important? And the minutia of daily life will fit in around it, right? But if you concentrate on the minutia first, you might not ever get around to those big rocks.
Right.
So what are your big rocks out there, listeners? Let's work on those first. Prioritize those today, right? And then the little tiny things, the little email correspondence, this, that, and that, or whatever.
The laundry.
Yes, you'll still be able to do that. But it's what worse tragedy is there than to have a moment of clarity upon your deathbed, realizing, I wish I'd spent more time, ... right? It's like, certainly it's not going to be, I wish I'd spent more time, doing more of the minutia that comes in day-to-day life,
Right. Yes, right.
So, what are your dreams? Put deadlines to your dreams. Let's punch today in the face with
Right. Yes. Oh, that sounds like a really great place to end this, unless you have something else you want to say.
Well, one thing I want to say is thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate your time. Appreciate the time for your listeners. I hope it's been valuable. It's been great fun for me, but thank you. I'm grateful.
Oh, good. Me too. It's been fun for me too. So thank you. And I commiserate with you on moving into your new house, but I know once you get settled, you'll be so happy. So
yeah, I did want to say one thing to your listeners. If there's anything I can ever help you out with, particularly if you are a patient of any type of chronic disease or whatever, again, my big calling is cancer patient advocacy and patient advocacy regardless. You can reach out to me on any social channel. It's my name, Ray Hartjen, RayHartjen. That's my site, rayhartjen.com. All the social media channels, that's my handle. If there's anything I can do for you, Lucinda, any of your listeners, please reach out to me. It would be my honor.
That will be great. And I will have all your social medias in the show notes for the listeners. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a rating and/or review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or if you like, you can subscribe to Story Power on Apple Podcasts. It's my aim to build a community where we discuss the stories we love and talk about what we learned from them. I offer extra audio content and story suggestions to my patrons on both platforms. Remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Let's spread the story love. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.